It's the mighty 11th day of 2023. Hello everybody, I'm back. I'm Dana Durnford. You can call in at the live shows. We're live currently if you're joining us at 709-589-4406. The big 4406. So there's not a nuclear scientist on the planet that looked at these two buildings in particular, Reactor 3 to your right, Reactor 4 to your left, and didn't know that fuel pools and reactor cores were gone. And there's not a nuclear scientist on the entire planet that would have looked at this building and didn't know that the fuel pools and reactor cores were gone. And for almost 13 years, been telling you it's not gone. And I mean, they've went to extremes to tell you it's not gone. There's not a nuclear scientist or academic on the entire planet in the nuclear industry, or a professor or academic, that didn't know when they seen these detonations that the fuel pool and the reactor cores were gone. And there's not a nuclear scientist on the entire planet that when they looked at the covers over the stumps knew that this was the cover-up story. This was a cover-up in every sense of the word. And there wasn't a journalist on the entire planet who wasn't extremely versed in telling lies about nuclear. That's how they make their money, after all. And every academic, particularly Arnie Gunnarsson, when he looked at the building to the left, and every nuclear scientist, every professor, every academic in the nuclear industry, nuclear students, the presidents of the deans of the universities, Yale and Stanford and Oxford and Harvard, when they seen that picture, there's no way they didn't know that the fuel pools were gone. There's no way the journalists didn't know the fuel pools were gone. And there's no way the journalists didn't know that they were faking the fuel pool in the fake building they were in. And actually, I'm going to play that clip. This is just four of them. Top left-hand corner was Seth Dorn, a senator's son, to the right, which is CBS United States and PBS, biggest media in the United States. Biggest media in United Kingdom, BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes. Done the same thing for Reactor 3, by the way. ABC, Cecilia Vega, in the bottom right-hand corner, is the biggest media in Australia. And she's currently at the White House press secretary, or press club as a journalist. And degenerate CNN Anna Curran, who makes $1 million a year perpetrating lies.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
How many people would take that job? Well, they cut their other people's throats to get that job. All the major countries worldwide made modeling of radioactive fallout based on venting, not based on the actual destroyed reactors that I just showed you. And the plume covers the entire planet in about 15 days. And after 20 days, it never stops. The radiation never disappears. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And it's in the same quantity or even worse than snowstorm. So imagine a snowstorm. And takes about 20 days, 25 days of the snowstorm, and the snow now covers the entire planet as a snowstorm. The snow never melts, and it goes on for 1 million years. And the snow never melts, and it never stops snowing. Get rid of the snow, and every snowflake replace it with a atom, an anthropogenic man-made atom. And that's what's going on. And we got 80 years of these emissions into the environment. They never go away. All the fuel pools worldwide, their emissions are multiple reactor cores still splitting atoms with no containment. And so there's 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the reactor buildings. Each of them are boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. So almost 250,000 liters a day per building evaporated into the air. Almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And just so make sure we're on the right page, the fuel pool is at the very top of the building, and so the journalists have to be above it to look down on the building, and that's the building they're claiming they were in. What do you think they've done that? Do you think they're doing that because it's normal? Each of these buildings are worse than all nuclear meltdowns combined worldwide. There's 4 of them that we can confirm, but we also have overwhelming evidence that the common spent fuel pool behind Reactor 4 was right behind it, very close to it, at the same level, and so the ocean would have ran right through it at 600 kilometers per hour, had lost its inventories. This year, they moved the goalposts. This is the first English version we've seen of the new version of Fukushima. This is a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering. Put some confidence in you. He's extremely smart, isn't he? Nobody's denying that. And he says it's equal to the 1,000 tanks that were built to manipulate you into thinking that they contained it. They contained nothing. There is nothing contained. The tanks were built to trick you into thinking that never happened. And lo and behold, what have we got going on the planet? People actually fight with me. Like, no, Dana, the tanks are full. They're full, Dana. I was like, okay, calm down, man. Calm down. Go watch some of my playlist. I got all the evidence for you. For a very long time, too. And so here we got a professor of quantum and nuclear engineering. Like in a normal world, if someone tells you they're a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering, you're like, pah. If you're smart, when someone says they're an engineer, professor of nuclear and quantum engineering, like, hey, get the frig away from me, piece of shit. That should be the normal reaction, because that would be my reaction. The discharge is like throwing a sugar cube with 3 grams into the ocean. It's dishonest. First off, they picked up 60 million one-ton, or 30 million one-ton bags. Some say 60 million. I'll play that clip for you, because otherwise Dana's making it up. I don't make all the documentation as often as I can. Just not been a good year for Dana. I've been sick, and I appreciate everybody sticking with me. I've been at this for so long, it seems like I've never done nothing else. That's a problem.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
that might have been a bit loud, my apologies. So they're saying 60 million one-ton bags. That was from this year. I'm saying 30 million. I'm trying to be the good guy. There's such a thing as a good guy. And that's the cover thumbnail for tonight's show. I know, it's crappy. So this was the poll from last night. Should Constipated Party 28 be considered useless after promoting deadly nuclear power plants, radioactive disease factories? Because that's what a nuclear power plant is a disease factory, right? There are laws against healing cancer. There really is. Global nuclear power faces unprecedented. I'm not going to take it on that road tonight, but we've done entire shows of academic studies only on this topic. Like 2 hours of nothing but academic studies showing you this is true. Global nuclear power faces unprecedented challenges. It's hit its lowest point in 4 decades. I didn't think anything could cheer me up today. In a stark revelation, the world nuclear industry, scum of the earth, status report has outlined severe challenges faced by the global nuclear disease factories in recent years. The report, covering development up to the mid-2023s, highlights a significant decline in nuclear production. I'm so sad. With its share dropping to the lowest point in 4 decades. I like to think I'd have a bit to play in that. The decline is attributed to a combination of factors. Well, not for Dana. There's nobody else out here doing an educational program that would turn the country away from nuclear, is it? Including national policy shifts, economic pressures, and the rapid growth of renewable energy alternatives. Which is a good way of putting it because there's so many alternatives. It's ridiculous. Taking the global nuclear energy share of commercial gross electricity generation is down 9.2%. That's the total, up from 17%, was it? I believe. It's a substantial, significant drop since the aftermath of Fukushima in 2012. Unfortunately, Fukushima happened in 2011, not 2012. It's okay, I'll forgive you. It is noteworthy that this year is now a little more than half of its peak of 17.5% in 1996. Recently leading a group of 20 countries in declaring a triple nuclear energy capacity from 2020 to 2050. They don't have the supply networks, for starters. They don't have that manpower. They don't have the educated, trained manpower. And this is just, like everything else at these conference of parties from the UN, everything, it makes all these promises and it never goes anywhere. Name me one thing in the 28 years of the Conference of Parties from the United Nations that came to fruition. You can't. But what's coming up next is really interesting. Decrease of the reactors compared to the previous year and 31 units below the peak observed in 2002. So it's been on a crash for 2 decades straight. With this, the report indicates that 407 reactors currently exist and are running, with a total capacity of 365 gigawatts were operational worldwide, which was really interesting because the capacity each year, so this year, 2023, Renewables came online was 440 gigawatts by the time the year is over. They expect it to be 440 gigawatts in 1 year. In 1 year, versus 70 years is only 365 gigawatts. So almost 100 gigawatts more in a single year than the total combined of reactors. So why are we even wasting our breath talking about these disease factories? Really, right? Because there's 440 gigawatts this year. Next year, there'll be 600 gigawatts or more. They expected between 2020 and 2026, the energy agencies, that there would be 4,800 gigawatt of renewables coming online. Unfortunately, the industry has booby-trapped all kinds of it, but it's still growing crazy, right? Canada last year closed down 700 wind and solar farms in Ontario, where all the nuclear reactors are to. 700. And they had $4.5 billion allocated to the 700 wind and solar farms for storage. And the new party got elected again, Justin Trudeau and them. And so they cut off all subsidies to them whatsoever and closed them. And so they took the $4.5 billion that they would have used for storage, because there's tons of storage solution, which would have put the nuclear out of business right away, see? So they closed down all the competition of renewables here in Canada. It's a communist country, right? It's totally nuclear, and they control the media and the universities and the key financial parts of the governments. So even with all that against it, and we see the price of commodities have doubled and tripled per ton each, renewables are still 440 gigawatts this year. And the only thing holding us back is the nuclear industry with these fables and false promises of small modular reactors and micro reactors. And you won't need renewables because we have these wonderful... They don't have nothing. They only have one application into the non-regulatory agency from NuScale, and that flopped. No surprise, I've only been telling you for the last 5 years how it's going to flop and when it's going to flop, since they opened their pie holes and stole all that money from the investors. And that's all they do. They just steal money in this Ponzi scheme, and they put out, oh no, we're looking really good, buy, and people buy the shares and then pay the most recent investors with investments from the current guinea pig investor. Remember Ernest Sternglass, the first scientist, put a number on the U.S. debts? Just bear with me. Which reminds me, we got a poll tonight too, don't we? Let me bring that up. Should the degenerate, despicable scum United Nations, COPS 28, which is the current iteration of their scam, be cancelled after this year to give humanity and the species a chance to survive? And anybody that's in any kind of knowledge about this subject knows why I'm saying that. And I came over here to get something, so hang on for me. I want to be ready. I got a lot of stuff ready for us tonight. But when you're doing this as long as I have, it's never good enough. You're always trying to make things much better. So Ernest Sternglass had quantified a death toll from the nuclear industry, and he was very conservative, for U.S. infant mortality, which has plunged steadily when they started nuclear testing, was essentially unchanged in the 50s and early 60s. Roughly 375,000 excess deaths. The cause, the author, physicist, University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine's professor, theorized that the stagnation in infant death progress was the result of atomic bomb test fallout. And so atomic weapons fallout is really nasty stuff. So why is the majority of nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Doesn't that just make you a little bit curious? Why is the majority of them surrounded by farms? And they know that the farms are going to suck up radiation. They got endless studies on it. It's endless. It's an overwhelmingly endless amount of studies. So why is almost every nuclear power plant on the planet surrounded by farms? That's the best way to poison you. See, they're active farms. They ship the radiation. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into your communities, into the farms. And the International Atomic Energy Agency admitted that there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, that the standards are based on benefit, not safety. In other words, the standards are based upon natural, like potassium, magnesium, iron, and stuff like that. It's not based on uranium and plutonium and americium. You know, this is not tenable. This is not sustainable. The most important thing on the planet is having this conversation, unfortunately, that has been missing from the narrative of humanity. Can't have a future without this narrative. That's the wrong picture. Crane incident at Barrow shipyard could have caused serious injuries. Well, these are the big places. They're employing a huge amount of people, typically in the thousands and thousands, right? And if you don't have a few accidents, when you do the statistic and you only have a few accidents, you're actually doing really good. There's tons of accidents, let's put it that way. When you put that many people in that environment and you got a lot of pressure from a lot of overeager supervisors, administrators, and the meddling of the industry. So the country's nuclear watchdog stepped in after a load was dropped from a crane at the site. The nuclear watchdog. To suggest there's actually a nuclear watchdog is ridiculous. It's actually a law. It's criminal. These are the furthest things from watchdogs, and that's the problem, right? Could less radiation in food make the public feel unsafe? So the only way you feel safe is with more radiation in your food. Back to this one here. The International Atomic Energy admitted there's no such thing as a safe level. That the standards, which are allowable because they're man-made, they're talking about. But the standards are not based on that. They're based on bananas and potato chips and walking in the sunshine. Which has got nothing, you can't conflate them and anthropogenic man-made radiation too. So they had a crane incident at the shipyard. The country watchdog stepped in, and it means literally nothing. But to suggest that less radiation in your food would make the public feel unsafe, I can't comprehend that. See? It just shows you this complete contempt for everything and everybody. Nuclear companies infiltrated the universities. The nuclear lobbying groups infiltrated the universities. And they have since basically the 40s and the 50s, and because of the secrecy with the Manhattan Project and the Mayak in Russia and whatever one they were using in Britain, they've never let go of the throats of those countries. This story is insane. Evacuation for nuclear incidents called into question. Well, ultimately you're talking about 450,000 people. And so how are you going to evacuate 450,000 people when you have a nuclear accident? If the wind is blowing at the community, there's nowhere to evacuate. You're going to breathe it in. If you stay home, you're going to breathe it in. If you try to run away, you're going to breathe it in. And that is not isolated to the community. A super important story because there's a whole bunch of plants they're trying to open back up in Japan that are way past their prime 10 years ago. And the Onagawa nuclear power plant, Miyagi, Prefecture Miyagi's, they picked up around 1 million one-ton bags of radiation in that prefecture. In farmland only. Just less than 2% of the land did they scratch the surface up a little bit. So the rest of it was never cleaned up, which means it's never going to go away. So a bunch of plants planning restarts. The wide area evacuation plans compiled by each prefecture, however, faces scrutiny for their effectiveness as the last line of defense to save the residents in the event of a nuclear disaster. Well, they got a lot of experience with it. So you can actually evacuate, and this model is based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. So where would you evacuate if you're the local residents? Because this is the radioactive fallout. And this is only 20 days. As you know, the whole planet is covered shortly after. The September meeting was held in the town of Raifu, 46 kilometers southwest of Tohoku Electric Power Okinawa plant, to distribute iodine tablets that help prevent, to a certain degree, almost maybe, exposure of the thyroid gland to radiation. So you got to take it 48 hours, preferably around 72 hours before the nuclear accident. And you're going to try to this is really concentrated iodine. It's very dangerous, by the way. And you're going to flood the theory is you're going to flood the thyroid gland with natural radiation to stop the anthropogenic man-made iodines from sequestering your thyroid. But all the other gammas, like cesium-134, 137, and all the other gammas emitters will concentrate in your thyroid gland. Right? And your muscles. And all the iodine still going to go in your muscles. Not all of it goes to your thyroid gland. Just a fraction of it goes in your thyroid gland. But the problem with the thyroid gland was it produces hormones. And so if you saturate this gland with anthropogenic man-made radiation, you're also going to now produce nothing but radioactive hormones, which is you open up Pandora's box for health issues. But the problem is, it's not just the thyroid gland. There's other glands, and there's other isotopes. There's all kinds of other isotopes. Now, the model, at the very top of the model, top of this here, I got curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiative fuel rods. And that model over there is 16 days or 14 days of radioactive fallout. It never stops. The whole thing eventually is just one great big invisible snowstorm of radiation that never goes away. And so all the species were saturated with the full range, including you and your friends and your families and your loved ones and everybody that you ever met and every species on the planet. And that's why we see the mass die-off of species. And this happens in increments over decades, and we're well on our way into the worst scenario imaginable. And there's 80 years of emissions going on from the fuel pools, which I don't understand why nobody else on the planet is acknowledging the fuel pool is still splitting atoms from all those reactor cores, and they will for hundreds of thousands of years. And so we're at the very beginning of massive emissions in the bigger picture, right? This is what I'm trying to, looking at deep geological repositories to try to get it away from the atmosphere, but it's too late, isn't it? Because you can't perceive it doesn't mean it's not attacking you. I can assure you it's attacking you. Isotopes of curium, which is the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods, and needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, which is named after the devil, and which is prolific. It's probably 3% of the fuel is plutonium, which works out to around 21,000 pounds per billion when you look at the fuel pools and you're being conservative. And isotopes of americium, which decays to plutonium, by the way. And there's a lot of them you need to worry about, and they're going to be in that same plume model to your left. And the plume to your left is based on cesium-137 over 14 days by the French government itself, the IRSN itself, and based on just a fraction of the actual inventories. It's only based on venting. It's not based on the nuclear meltdowns that I laboriously explained to you at the beginning of the show. But just to get you back in the right frame, just that building over there is worse than all nuclear reactors combined meltdowns currently on the planet. And there's 4 of these buildings are gone and 8 fuel pools. The doctor gave an explanation of the tablets distributed as supplies that would have covered about 130 people. But the problem is, these tablets don't work. It's insane to suggest that this is going to work. It's literally insane to suggest that this is going to save you or help you or mitigate it. It might mitigate it by 1 or 2% maybe, but that's it. I don't know what kind of effect there will be in the future if young children are exposed to radiation. A 40-year-old woman from Sendai said with a sigh, as she received the tablets for her family of 5. Well, let me help you, honey. There's lots of information already. Radiation health specialists, children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. Like, try wrapping your mind around that statement, because you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So take 11 of them and try to perceive it. And you'd be hard-pressed to eat food where there's not at least 11. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. So take 200 million atoms and separate 50 of them and perceive it. Because that 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't filter that. Despite the crap you're hearing about the ALP system, it's ludicrous to suggest you can filter fuel particulates and be able to get back in that room or change a filter ever again. The doses are too high. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. We're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima radiation, said the head of the Tokyo Medical Clinic. So originally there was quite a bit of dissenting voices, wasn't there? In a study in Fukushima Prefecture, the Fukushima children, thyroid cyst and node tumors. These were 2-centimeter tumors. Pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. Post-Fukushima was, if you scale it up, was 358,000 out of a million. And this study was 13,646 out of 38,000. Pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. The tumors we're talking about is 2 centimeters. The thyroid gland is only 3 by 5 centimeters. So that's a significant tumor if you put it in context. And who's vetting the studies for thyroid cancers in Fukushima? Dr. Jerry Thomas from the United Kingdom, right? One of the worst lawyers you'll ever come across. One of the most disgusting subhuman species we've ever come across. A true monster who snuffs out kids with radiation when she's not snuffing out their brains as a professor. The distribution is limited to people under the age of 40. But the problem is it affects everybody. But they don't want to give anybody over 40 thyroid because it'll cause more thyroid problems. They don't want to give you thyroid because that'll add to the artificial number created by the anthropogenic man-made radiation. And pregnant women who live in a 5-kilometer, that's child abuse to live within 5 kilometers of a nuclear power plant, because they're always hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools, by the way. And if you start looking up heart problems in liver and lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia, if you do a study on all of these diseases within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, you'll never, ever go within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant again. You couldn't drag you there screaming and kicking. You still couldn't get you to go there again. The distribution is limited to people under the age of 40 and pregnant women live in a 5-kilometer radius precautionary action zone. The PAZ is a precautionary action zone. Precautionary. No, it's like you can't avoid radiation. If you do a sex ratio study, you'll find more males than females born there because everybody's poisoned with radiation. That's what the studies we've already used hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times show, where people would have to go through the precautionary action zones to evacuate. So you have to, in order to evacuate, you got to go through a nuclear wasteland to evacuate. To talk you into anything, eh? I can't believe somebody would live in that environment. The top radiation expert, 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans, adults, lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. What do you think happens after that? What do you think is going on with the immune system when that's happening? You got the immune system's compromised, and so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. We got a poll. I'll bring that up maybe. Should United Nations Conference of Parties 28, Constipated Party 28, be cancelled after this year to give humanity and 8 million species, or whatever's left of them, I should say, a chance to survive and exist and flourish? Kochi, 62, a doctor from Fukushima prefecture, distributed tablets at the event, said the government at I-Day tablets, said the government should expand the scope of precautionary distributions. And the effect of the nuclear action would exceed the area the government has set. And he was involved in prescribing idiot tablets to several hundred people who fled Fukushima prefecture from areas near the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear number 1 plant after 2011 meltdown accident. And don't even have the courage to call it a nuclear meltdown. This model to your left is Noah's model. Is based upon 40 days of radioactive fallout. I'm going to double the original speed to 200, to double. And this is only based on venting. This is cesium iodines. And so they didn't put in the nuclear meltdown millions and millions of pounds into those models. And you know what that model would look like if they did? The wide area evacuation plan for the Okinawa plant, which covers 200,000 people in 7 municipalities within a 30-kilometer radius, which should be a minimum of 100 kilometers, shouldn't it? Was approved by the government's nuclear disaster panel in 2020, June. In principle, the plan called for evacuation by buses and private cars to cities, towns, and villages within the prefecture. Well, you know, North America coastlines should evacuate if you have a nuclear accident in Europe or Asia, because prevailing winds bring it to North America right away. And so this was a U.S. study showing radioactive xenon-133 in Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels after Fukushima, and it persisted for weeks. It persisted for weeks. There was a study in 2019 of the children in Japan that are being born, the neonates and the infants, had congenital malformation, mitigation surgeries, open heart surgery on 14.2% of 100,000 live births, which is 14,200 children out of every 100,000 need open heart surgery. Stunning numbers. Or they're going to have incredible congenital malformations as they get older. If a tsunami of the magnitude of the Great Eastern Japan earthquake hits, the roads along the coastline will be unusable. And it's reckless to create a plan without assuming the damages, and it will only leave citizens in trouble if we don't do anything about it. Well, if it hits, you're not going to evacuate, because that's what it looked like in 2011. According to the city's evacuation plan made in 2017, about 140,000 residents will head to some 300 locations in 27 other municipalities within the prefecture. If you got to leave and go to those places, then you need to leave the prefecture. And you might as well do it in advance if I was you. By forming groups in accordance with administrative or school districts to keep existing communities. Well, you got to wait for them to clear the road, because that's what happened in 2011, so it can happen again. And they're expecting a bigger one within 30 years of Fukushima. The city held meetings to exchange opinions with the 27 municipalities would be hosting the victims. Then Mayor Hiroshi also visited all the municipalities to seek their understanding. Well, you got to take them. We got to keep the plant. Without the plant, I haven't got a job. Even now the plan is not perfect, we have to improve the plan by making use of the lessons learned from 2011 disaster. I guess even more creepy. Other prefecture as an option. They hid of the Kanyo, a Tokyo-based Institute of Environmental Economics, a member of the committee that assesses Niigata Prefecture's evacuation plans, doubts the effectiveness of the Miyagi plant. And Miyagi, which is a nuclear wasteland already, like full of hot particles, Miyagi Prefecture-wide area evacuation plans should fundamentally start from the worst-case scenario based on scientific estimates. But its effectiveness is questionable as there are many uncertain points. Well, that's Miyagi. That's what happened to Miyagi the last time. Should be no problem to evacuate through all that, should it? And residents in the cities where the plant is located are especially worried about a combined disaster, nuclear and heavy snow, which is realistic, right? Because in that part of Japan, they have a lot of heavy snowfall, which would leave escape routes prone to being blocked. Well, Lahaina, Hawaii showed us that just a couple cars can block thousands of people in. So how are you going to evacuate? Because they're not going to be able to clear the roads for weeks, if not months. This community overlooking the Sea of Japan was hit by a record snowfall for 3 days, December the 18th of last year. And the major expressway was closed for 52 hours. And the National Route 8 was shut for about 38 hours. So if you got stuff like this, and the accident will usually happen during a severe event like that on top of that, then your best bet is to get out of there as quick as you can. Because you know they're going to do it. So 14,000 residents in the first 5-kilometer radius, and 64,000 more in the so-called Urgent Protective Action Planning Zone. Covers an area from 5 to 30 kilometers from the plant. And under the prefecture's wide area evacuation plan, compiled in 2019, about 430,000 people in 9 municipalities with a 30-kilometer radius of the disease factory will evacuate by bus or private car to 23 other cities, towns, and villages in the prefecture in principle. But as you know, if you try to evacuate 430,000 people, you're going to be caught in plume. A majority of them, if not all of them, are caught in plume right away. Because you got to breathe. You can't, and if you shelter in place, it's even stupider because you got to breathe. You can't hold your breath for 56 hours. Elko 54, the co-head of the citizen group against the plant's restart, said she could not use her car around her house, which is within the 30-kilometer zone, during last year's heavy snow. I felt strongly that safe evacuation was impossible. Well, obviously, if you can't use your car, then how do you get out of there? The entire village, and they have an aging society, so a lot of people not very mobile. The entire village is within 5 kilometers of the disease factory, so they're being poisoned constantly from the fuel pools. Even today, before it even starts back up, the fuel pools are still there hemorrhaging radiation into the community 24 hours a day. The evacuation plan, and then it's going to be surrounded by farms at the same time. One great big stupid poison machine, isn't it? The evacuation plan calls for the prefecture and the village to discuss whether to have the village's 4,300 residents evacuate immediately. You should evacuate now, just as a precaution, because you're in a nuclear wasteland zone. If you're within 5 miles, in this case is 5 kilometers, then you're being pounded with huge radiation. It's absurd how much radiation you're being exposed to. That's why you're seeing this explosion of heart and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. Or stay indoors during a nuclear disaster within a couple of kilometers of a nuclear disease factory. Is somehow an option. If your children were in those houses, would you be telling them to stay indoors? Of course not. So if you stay indoors and they come in and clean up your town later, this is just one of 105,000 places that looked just like this in 2019. So there was a lot of people in this area stayed indoors and are still there today if they're still alive. And you know they got incredible health issues. But look at the amount we're talking about. It's just a fraction of 30 million one-ton bags. In the event of a combined disaster involving an earthquake, a tsunami, or a snowstorm, so you got it combined, the mayor said the village should prepare to take the risk of radiation exposure. So they went around and got everybody to say, yeah, no, I would rather my children and my loved ones get sick with radiation than you lose your job, mayor. The mayor, speaking for the whole village, said they're going to take one for Japan. Imagine saying something like that. Imagine just thinking that, let alone actually coming out and saying it in the media. Imagine how disconnected. And don't get me wrong, there's morons. And there's plenty of them, right? They believe what the government tells them, what the universities tell them. Like that, literally the stupidest thing you can do is go hang out in that area. That is the definition of a moron. A very well-disciplined moron. That's a moron. Really, that's the very epitome of a moron. If heavy snowfall and other conditions prevent us from evacuating, the best course of action is to stay indoors, said the mass murdering mayor. Adding to forcing residents to evacuate in bad weather may cause a secondary disaster. But if you stay there, it's guaranteed you're going to get sick and have to liquidate your assets to live a few extra years. I think the village should get together and lynch the mayor. That's the right thing to do in that case, isn't it? To learn the lessons from the meltdown accident. To learn the lessons. Oh, you didn't. Obviously, suggesting people stay in a nuclear wasteland. How evil have you got to be to do that, I wonder? Then they got how disconnected from reality are you to do something like that? Then they got the prefecture government, which is a nuclear wasteland. In 2012, launched a 3-part review to examine the cause of the Fukushima. Well, good for them. Are they ever going to share with anybody? They're still denying that the reactors melt down. Did they come out and say that these people are faking being in that building? Right? Because that's a really important question. Among the 3 parts, the committee to examine evacuation methods involved 9 experts in disaster prevention, medical care, and traffic engineering. What? No nuclear experts? Really? That's quite interesting. So you're not being realistic, in other words. Because they don't know what they're doing. This is a nuclear, for goodness sakes. You don't treat this like a hurricane or a tropical storm or a lot of snow or something. This is radioactive fallout, for goodness sakes. There's an urgency there. You can't turn back the clock. And every second counts. The committee compiled a massive report of 456 issues and 12 topics. 456 issues. That's being pretty generous. On 12 topics, including setting up the communication channel for sharing accident information, established methods for radiation monitoring. Radiation monitoring. If you find any at all, you should get editor. But what they're talking about is, it's all within a safe Japan artificial limit. But it did not evaluate a key point, the feasibility of the evacuation plan itself. It didn't evaluate the evacuation plan. Good God, man, what's wrong with you? properly consider issues such as which patient at medical institutions should be evacuated first, to what extent radiation exposure can be allowed from medical personnel. Well, there's no limit. There's no safe limit. And that international scumbag agency, UN's IAEA degenerates, are based on natural stuff, not anthropogenic man-made. Once you get it in your system attacks it for the rest of his life. So you breathe in, you stay in this area, you're breathing in atoms. Each time you breathe in, hundreds are sequestering in your body, in your muscles, your organs, your bones. Your thyroid, your adrenaline glands, everything else, your pituitary glands. So it's sequestered there, it's stuck there for the rest of your life. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light, each one of them. And every time you breathe in, you're getting another 100, 2,000 or whatever. And they distribute it throughout your whole body so quick, it's ridiculous how fast this happens. And because they're so small, they go through the liners of your lungs into your bloodstream to distribute it symmetrically throughout your whole body in about 20 minutes or something. And you're staying there, you're breathing more in every minute. And so every atom, it pulses energy almost at the speed of light. It's killing millions of chromosomes and DNA and cells. And your body has to repair all of that and at the same time produce enough white blood cells also to try to build a sarcophagus around that emitter, which could take 10, 20, 30 years. But it still has to repair every second the detonations. So there's 100% cause and effect, and it's permanent. So your body attacks each and every atom and the million destroyed parts of your body every second. It has to try to repair 1 million damaged from each atom. And so you're still breathing in, you're sequestering it in. Now you're producing so many white blood cells, you got what they call leukemia. And because it's permanent, there's no way to come back from it. So the more you breathe in, the less likely you are to survive it, right? Or the more you're setting the scale that you can't survive it. Your body can't compensate for it because it attacks it. Your body doesn't have an immune trigger to defend against it. And so it attacks it viciously with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And every time it explodes, it's killing DNA, chromosomes, and cells, and it has to repair them at the same time. So the more, for every white blood cell, you'd have to displace a red blood cell, right? Which carries oxygen and nutrition. And so the danger and the damage, you can't perceive it, obviously, but it's lethal because it compromises your immune system very shortly, which then leaves you more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless, innocuous, and benign. It should probably properly consider issues such as patience. The most severe situation for a nuclear reaction would be nighttime in winter with accumulated snow. The director of the Energy Forum, a citizens group in favor of restarting the plant, stressed that everyone must think of ideas to minimize the risk on the assumption that the unexpected circumstances will occur. On the assumption. And if it does occur, here's what they're going to do. The Asian media and American media are going to come out and they're going to say, here we are at Reactor 4. You're getting the fuel out of the pool. Arnie Gunnison will be like a crush pack cigarettes. You got to pull one out. That's the fuel rod. And every lawyer, Helen Keller, elevator screeching on the internet. Trust the news. Trust the science. Mark. Trust the science. Where are you to, Helen, you old crow? There we go. This one, that one, this one, that one, that one, this one, this one, that one, that one, this one. The long version or the short version? I'll adjust the volume when I see it here.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate
So this is one where they asked Helen Caldicott, does it look like the building to the right or does it look like the one to the left?
your family from Boston. Think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
But it doesn't. It looks like that. You can't change that. By robots are the homeless, the destitute, and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. What happened to the USS Thresher? Well, I don't know, George. What happened to it? I don't know, Timmy. It was a nuclear submarine with a whale in the bow, if I remember correctly. And it just disappeared, like a lot of nuclear submarines. Sure, they're contaminating the ocean forever. 6 decades of radioactive emissions. That's what the USS Thresher is. Stupid military machines. The biggest problem, the reason we're losing all the species because of the military. The nuclear fuel cycle is about, it has to go through 18 months, the nuclear fuel, in order to start producing enough plutonium so they can make weapons. So once you take it out of the reactor, now it's useful. 129 sailors and crew were tragically taken in the sinking. Their job was to go out and sink, most likely. Australia's holds still to be used for Aussie built nuclear subs. So Australia, crazy, stupid Australia, no offense to anybody from Australia, it's the government and the military, has 7 of the biggest weapons producer on the planet now set up shop in the last decade in Australia. 7 out of 10 of the big weapons, military industrial complexes are set up in Australia. So Australia's going to spend $370. What's the military going to be moving on all that? Because you know that's who's going to be using it the most. Yeah, there's a few cars there for passengers. They do the same thing with nuclear power plants. They give you some electricity at very exorbitant rates and endless subsidies for the nuclear disease factories. And they surround them with farms and poison you. But it's all about getting fuel to make more nuclear bombs that they can't use. And they will never use. They have no intentions of using, because you can't cash your check next Friday if you use them, right? The announcement follows a $16.4 billion investment announced in November for 25 projects. Americans' busiest for the passenger rail. Yeah, how many cars are going to be allocated to the military-industrial complex, the government, and the lobbying groups and everybody else? And do you think any of that will actually come to fruition? It's hard to imagine, really. Top speeds of 220 miles per hour. And North Wales Primary School may close due to fewer births. What else is new on this planet? Plant Vodal debate splits environmental consumer advocates. So they have control opposition there, right? They control both the environmental and the consumer. Advocates are the industry itself. That's how they work, eh? It's never worked any other way, so. This is about the rich. This is rich. State energy regulators, environmental and consumer advocates who act as watchdogs. Yeah, right. So, What are they, triple the original budget or something? So they're going to bill the customers for 45% of the project's cost. The price tag of $14 billion was approved in 2009. It's 2023. It's still nowhere near running. And now it's about, give or take, $10 billion, $35 billion. You know, we can do it for less than $14 billion. $1 billion later. You know the story. The kid comes up and asks his dad for $50 for the first time. And the dad said $30. Where the hell am I getting $20 to? Geez, last time I had $10. I can't remember. I'll check. I got $5 there. I'm going to need some of that. So here's $2. $14 billion when the PSC approved the project. Now it's $35 billion. Well, 90% of the money goes to administration, right? We see this over and over and over in the nuclear industry. 90% of the money goes to administration. We had 34, what was it last night? And I'll go find it. For just for kicks. Bear with me. La 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 la. La 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 la. Vroom, 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 vroom. Let me see if I can find it. I can't handle the pressure, too much pressure. I can't handle this pressure. Hang on. There we go. I think that's the right one. We had 85 views. 1 minute later, it said 21 views on my video when it was over. Yeah, 21 views and 41 thumbs up. So I had double the thumbs up as I had views. But officially, it says I had 85 viewers. So normally I would have 85 views at the end of the show, 80, 85. But what they done was they just got at me. The last video, they only gave me 11. I had 34 thumbs up at the end of the show. They got no one to pick on, right? And so I'm basically a virtual fly for them, and they're a bunch of kids, and they're like picking my legs and my ears and stuff off. And that's how it's done digitally, though. It's a metaphor. Nuclear industry got no competition, really. There's nobody out there kicking the shit out of the scumbags. That's why they're scumbags. Originally, the bill expanded eligibility. Oh, let me go back on this story. New Mexico delegation outraged at a move to block expanded nuclear radiation compensations. This is absurdness. Welcome to America. Out of my eye, help you out. Hang on, I'll find what I'm looking for. I got an enormous amount of that kind of bad luck that I'll find it. Oh, bring it on. Let me see this one here. My God, I got too much. Should I put down U.S. fallout or something? Holy shit. I want to go back to the nuclear weapons fallout, and I got the entire telephone book of it here on my computer, unfortunately. Oh, maybe I got lucky here. Yeah. Can't seem to find the ones I'm looking for. Oh, there it is. So each of these was nuclear testing, 1951 and 1962. And this was area crossed by 2 or more radioactive clouds during nuclear testing, is in black, right? So they radiated America because they were worried the Russians were going to do it. So people were so complacent that, like, Las Vegas would run promotions in the city. They would fly you in for the weekend because they knew exactly when the tests were going off, and you have your hotel rooms, and then you would have like a little picnic outside the hotel and little brunches and drinks before you went to the casinos and watched the detonations, right? So complacent doesn't... Now, these maps really don't do it justice, but it does show you... well, they went to the Bikini Atolls, which in 2019 the studies said 1 million square kilometers was too radioactive to live in. Okay, so I'm going to go backwards. New Mexico delegation outraged that it moved to block expanded nuclear radiation compensation. So it was infinitely worse than this. So should the victims that were, you can see the black zone where all the testing was done up there, should those people who were in the worst fallout be compensated? Well, there's a senator in the American Congress who blocked compensation for people sickened by the exposure to radiation during weapons testing, and also the mining of the uranium. And so originally the bill expanded eligibility for the compensation under the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, offering up tens of thousands of dollars in compensation to residents in New Mexico, Colorado, Montana, Guam, Missouri, as well as those in some parts of Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, who suffered the effects of the nuclear testing uranium mines also, and were not covered under the current program. Well, the people that were closest were denied any health care whatsoever, because they don't want them looking at the statistics for that down the road. The Santa Fe New Mexican reported that the compensation was included in the massive defense spending bill that always wins approval, right? This year was $1 trillion for nuclear alone, was it? In July. But the GOP, which is the Americans, GOP-controlled House removed those provisions from the Act Wednesday, rendering New Mexicans, including those stricken from elements from the radioactive fallout of the first atomic bomb, are still ineligible for federal help unless it is reattached to the final bill. That is stunning. I mean, my God, man. You don't got to be that cruel. And look at the black zone up there. But remember, this fallout doesn't really do it justice. Because in Bikini Islands, it's over 1 million square kilometers. It's too radioactive to be habitable. Generations of New Mexicans and their family gotten sick and died. Devastating generation after generation after generation, lasting impact to the Trinity. They don't want to give them compensation because then you would see the incredible damage to the lineage of the families. For New Mexico to have been ground zero for the first nuclear weapons test and left out of the original RECA program is an injustice. Now, it's on purpose because you would have seen everybody got sick. Every child born ended up getting sick, and the majority of them dying. Very young ages of debilitating radiation illnesses. So Lou Jan, a Democrat, has introduced radiation exposure compensation bills in every Congress since he was first elected in 2008. And the hit summer film Oppenheimer, which is propaganda in overdrive, about the top secret Manhattan Project and dawn of nuclear age during World War II, brought new attention to decades-long efforts to extend compensation for families who were exposed to fallout and still grapple with the related illness, which is everybody. And it's everybody in a very bigger, the whole country should be entitled to compensation. Advocates who have been trying for years to bring awareness to the lingering effects of radiation exposure to the Navajo nations, where there's 15,000 abandoned uranium mines and also has to be 15,000 abandoned chemical ponds. where millions of tons of uranium ore were extracted over decades to support the U.S. nuclear activities. And they had a major accident where one of their huge tailing ponds had broke open and it flooded. The engineers knew this was going to happen anyway. It was going to seep there, and with any amount of rain, it would flood there into the only drinking water source they have. They done it on purpose. Dead man tells no tale, right? And that's all the war machine is good for, is killing us. More nuclear reality check. That story was private per se. My column last Thursday, the real reason small modular reactor technology will flop, December the 7th. Well, he wrote that after NuScale flopped, right? Elicited more than the usual number of reactions. Well, no, because it's a touchy subject, right? They're really creepy people, too, in the small modular, because they used to stalk me all the time on the telephone, right? They were really arrogant, especially those from small modular reactor communities. But unfortunately, most of them were not about the actual topic. He wrote this after NuScale flopped, and then he came out and bragged that he was the seer. Legislators want nuclear safety net. This is the Philippines. Creepy Philippines. The nuclear industry is slowly taking over the Philippines. Look like they're going to do something stupid over there, like nuclear. Legislator on Saturday pushed for enactment of a bill that intends to guide the Marcos administration on the use of nuclear sources to help obtain energy security. Well, like you in order to run a nuclear power plant, it needs dedicated gas, oil, and coal, at least 2 of these huge plants. It's ludicrous to suggest energy security. Geothermal, which is everywhere, and the technology to drill deeper and deeper is getting more easier and easier, and the technology coming online for geothermal drills next year is a drill that has 25,000 psi water jet cutters to cut the rocks, and then it has a pneumatic water-driven hammer that pounds the rocks so it gets cut, then smashed, and then the drill bit can go through it and deep, and it can drill 4, 5, 6 times quicker, and it's about to become common technology next year. It's common. It's available now. Anybody can jury rig it right now. House Bill 9293 aims, which is the Philippines, a legal framework that will govern and make possible, this is International Atomic Energy Agency framing you can hear and everything going under. It makes possible the safe use of nuclear energy, which is there's no safe use of nuclear energy. Once the first fuel cycle is complete, 18 months, it comes out and goes to a fuel pool. It's hemorrhaging radiation, physical atoms into the environment all day. It's still splitting atoms. You can't contain it. There is no containment, so everything's vented into the community. Up the tall, skinny stacks, right? Once approved by the 19th Congress and signed into law by the President, the measure will clear the way to safe use of nuclear or atomic power for our household, commercial, or industrial power requirements. It's always about military cycle for the fuel. That's all it's about. In step with the Marcos administration long-term strategy to spell energy security while steadily weaning the country from fossil fuel and reducing the carbon footprint, which is a United Nations narrative that shouldn't exist. Why is everybody getting on one knee and kissing the ring of this organization known as UN, which has no sovereignty over any country? To be known as the Philippines National Nuclear Energy Safety Act. But there is no such thing as a safety act. I got a picture of him when he's not at work. He takes that stupid little mask off. That's what he actually looks like, isn't he? Scumbag. There are a dime a dozen in the nuclear industry. Creep is the name of the day. What would the nuclear industry do without creeps? couldn't exist without all the scumbags. It only exists because it's all scumbags. We must advance nuclear energy in the United States. How anybody can put their daughter in the nuclear industry is beyond me, man. That's craziness. It's pervert nation. That's what a nuclear industry is. I mean, Windscale, or the La Hague in France, for instance, has 500 security guards. Like, try wrapping your mind around that. First off, no one's going to try to steal something from a nuclear site anyway, because the only stuff there is lethal doses. And 500 security guards, it's not about protecting the site. It's about stopping you from seeing what's going on. That's all it's about. There's nothing else going on there. It's a very vulnerable site. It's very easy for these sites to have a catastrophic accident. Windscale's had one, for instance, 1957. They're still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean from the mixed oxide fuel meltdown that is still not contained today. I must say, like, the United Kingdom was just dirtbags, the nuclear industry. And even today, they're nothing but dirtbags, aren't they? We must advance nuclear energy in the United States. By U.S. Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Miss America 2023, Grace Stink, and Chris Bernard. Well. 3 little piglets all in a row. There is a solution right in front of our eyes. In fact, we're already seeing that the solution in action. Meanwhile, clean, reliable, abundant nuclear energy already provides 20% of America's electrical power generation. Could be the key to powering the world. Like, this is right off the United Nations first page on their website, for goodness sakes. At least gets creative. The Miss America is a nuclear first year at that student. She's not even a nuclear student. She's just a first year student in university. There's 440 gigawatts of renewables this year, and over the last 70 years, we only have 365 gigawatts of nuclear. So if you want security, and nuclear is the last one you should be looking at. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging into your community, Stink, Miss Marika. And you know it. She's such a dirty skank. Geothermal heat pumps help decarbonize energy use and more. So the geothermal heat pumps, you only drill them down 100 feet. Anybody can do it. It's stupid. Simple to do, right? But everybody's ignoring geothermal because once you see it and realize it, you don't want to see anything else. It's so simple and excellent. And if you took all the universities for one day and you put 10 students in every class and solving any problem, let alone geothermal, you'll come up with a solution, won't you? What was it the Japanese had said? They had 1,500 universities, and if they had to, they were going to get these 1,500 universities to resolve any kind of robotics issues, because they were going to do this revolution and have a robot in every home within 5 years or something. And the technology is now, and it was at one of those CES electronics shows. It's probably 12 years ago or something. And I was like, oh crap, here it comes. Google, about 5 years ago, just after they bought DARPA's little pit, Boston Dynamics, were claiming, and they had entered contests with a humanoid to drive an automobile and a track course with other people for this annual robotics test. The idea was to create a humanoid robot that can leave a building, close the door, go and get in the car, start it up, and drive away, and drive a difficult course. And so they were trying to come up with software, because the software now you can just throw it in any robot, right? And you'll get the functionality if they're using the simple algorithms that they're using. And so I have no doubt, right? Because once you get them to a certain point, the robots, you can buy 100 robots, put them in a warehouse, and they can mine and create their own materials and build themselves, right? You can have an army pop out of the ground in 10 years of 60 million robots. And they all want your car battery. So nuclear, we're seeing so much of this narrative of there is no carbon-free future without nuclear, and there's no this without nuclear, there's no that without nuclear. But nuclear is dying everywhere you look. Literally dying in front of your eyes. France can't keep any of their reactors running full time. They're all old and decrepit. Now they're going to build 6 more, but that'll take them 25 or 30 years. They can't even build the ones in United Kingdom or in the other countries. Shelley Moore Capto represents the West Virginia state and is author of the Bipartisan Advance Act. And Grace Stank is Miss America 2023, a first-year nuclear engineering student, basically a moron, at the University of Wisconsin. And Chris Bernard is the president of the American Conservation Coalition Action. And I can go out and find the clips of Miss Americas, and the majority of them can barely add without a calculator. The majority of them they don't have any critical thinking skills, let's put it that way, whatsoever. Bless their hearts. The United States wants to get serious about long-term energy security and environmental goals. Like, why would you use nuclear in the same sentence as environmental goals? By the way, Dominion activates Virginia's largest grid-scale battery storage facility. Why would you do something like that? Geothermal is better than lithium batteries, for goodness sakes. And a better way to store energy, there's a couple of ways. One is pumped hydro. If you have 2 artificial ponds where you pump water up one, so you build 2 artificial ponds and you just pump water, they call it a water battery, and you pump water uphill with excess energy. Simple technology is very effective, by the way. And another one is, we've seen 10 gigawatts hours of storage now for these things, is pumped compressed air storage. So the biggest one they're building right now is 10 gigawatt hours of storage. And it's simple because all you're doing is digging mine shafts, right? And you're compressing air down. And now they have windmills, and that's all they do is compress air. And then the heat, there's a lot of heat when you're compressing air. And that heat is stored underground in salt or lava rocks from volcanoes. And then which stores 600 or 700 degree temperatures for months at a time. But all you got to store it for a few days or a day, and then you can unpack the compressed air a lot quicker, right? A lot more energy without. They're so friendly. They're 93% efficient or something. And they can run on their own electricity, unlike a nuclear power plant. So you can compress air storage, you can pump hydro, you can geothermal, and there's many, many other techniques. You know, there's these ones where you just build a pond, and in the pond you have all these bladders. And you can store air in these bladders. And because it's under pressure, you can store a lot more air. And then when you release it, you have this extra expansion because every 30 feet you're under 14.5 pounds per square inch or something. On December 8th and 9th, third meeting an international group of eminent persons, wow, for a world without nuclear weapons. Shouldn't eminent persons be worried about nuclear power plants first? A total of 14 members attended the meetings. I was pretty disappointed with them. I went and watched some of this stuff. Let me remind these people. In the United States, gathered to dispose of depleted uranium shells for aircraft guns and tanks. Like the aircraft guns are the A-10 Warthog. All it shoots is these dirty bombs. Right, the A-10 Warthog only shoots these dirty bombs. Each one of them are a dirty bomb. Studied the question of disposing of 35.7 million rounds of ammunition. 37.5 million dirty bombs with a core of depleted uranium. Now, it's gone through the chain reaction. And we've been covering this for 20-something years, the depleted uranium. And this is nobody's friend, right? A Japanese physicist at a Hamburg conference in Germany during the Gulf slaughter, you call it the Gulf War, they admitted to using 700 tons of DU, which was the animosity equivalent of 44,000 Hiroshima bombs, which was a uranium bomb, 44,000 Hiroshima-type bombs, a low-level radioactive fallout, but with longevities long past the human experience. For 700 tons. These things shoot 1.5 tons a minute. And most of their favorite targets appear to be schools and universities and schools and universities and hospitals and shops and civilian houses. So 35.7 million rounds because they got new munitions. Yeah, we paid for it. And, yeah, but you know, it expires after a year. How many times have you done that, I wonder? How many times has Russia done it? How many times has United Kingdom done it? What are they doing with it? How come they don't recycle it? It's got a half-life of millions of years. Well, because there's no money in that. The big money is in using it over and over and putting it in your community, in your landfills and everything. The industry hates our guts. It hates every insect and every bird and everything else. So what should you do with 35.7 million rounds of depleted uranium? It used to be called DOLRAM, depleted uranium low-level radioactive material, but they got rid of the latter part of the acronym. Nobody knows who done it or why. Well, we know why, because now they just call it depleted uranium, but it's not depleted. It's still uranium and americium and neptunium and strontium, everything else is mixed into it because it's gone through a chain reaction. It's left over from the weapons, it's left over from the nuclear cycle. It's gone through a chain reaction, period. It's low enough that they coat it, right, with a special coating, but it's pyrophoric, so it burns when it's going through the air. And it releases huge amounts of radiation, particularly uranium, that's gone through a chain reaction into the environment. And rather than store it for 1 million years, they just go out and spray it around. And because the average person can't comprehend it, is not paying attention to it, the average person couldn't care less about that article right there. And when you read the article, usually it's way down in the story. They're so cocky, they put it up in the first sentence and nobody even paid attention to it. I read the story and I was horrified. How did he suppose? Why did he study it now? Is this the first time he ever got rid of munitions? Study the question of disposal of 35.7 million munitions with a core of depleted uranium. 30mm aircraft cannon. It was accepted into service in the U.S. 7-barrel rotary cannon, the GAU-8A Avenger, which is used on the A-10 Warthog. But they have a ridiculous amount of DU weapons. Even the soldiers that are walking on the ground, they have DU munitions. Hang on, that's the wrong one. Maybe it's the right one. I don't know. This is them after dumping it into the ocean. When your Geiger counter is holy shit, and you're just close to a ship, because they're going to dump it in the ocean, right? It's in 45-gallon drums that are not 6 feet thick. So that means you're not sheltered. Hang on, I'll get there. The only problem is I got too much on my computer. And ridiculous how much I got. And everything I got there, I want to show it to you, but anyway, this is a lost cause for me to try to find. All the crazies. It's wow. Okay, let's keep going because it's been a while since I typed in DU. I should do a whole video rather than try to find my way through this. Holy shit. Okay, let's get out of here. Well, they dumped 450 billion gallons of industrial radiological contaminants directly into the soil in Hanford. 450 billion gallons is equal to an aquarium 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the planet and a little bit more. That's what they dumped into the soil right alongside the Columbia River that ultimately flows down past 25,000 farms, millions of people, and into the Pacific. And how much did China do? I wonder, in India and Pakistan and Canada and America and Israel and the rest of them, I wonder. So 35.7 million dirty bombs. Where did they put the 30? They just somehow, when you're not paying attention, oh, we can't tell you, that's secret. You don't live in such and such a city, do you not? Ah, you'll be okay. You'll be just fine. Everything is just fine. I pray fears of a major leak of Sellafield nuclear plant are being taken seriously. Are you kidding me? There's nobody serious at Sellafield. There are reports of more than 100 safety problems at the Sellafield nuclear power plant. Well, it's also a mixed oxide fuel facility, right, for 60 years or something. They contaminated all of Europe and the Arctic, and them in France, the big, because they had two major ones, or three in UK, and they have had three in France. La Hague being the biggest one. And a leak first reported 4 years ago has been allowed to worsen. So there's like we covered that 4 years ago. I can't remember it off the top of my head because the nuclear industry keeps you on your toes every day of the week. It's just not one great big stupid. There's no such thing as a leak, by the way, when it comes to nuclear. The nuclear industry should never be allowed to use the word leak. It's a nightmarish prospect, and I hope someone's taking urgent. Really? Well, you're right. It's a Colombian native. Well, it's zero possibility. Every so often, when we were children, Father would borrow a portable Geiger counter and take us to the beach. While me, my sister, and I played on the sand, he would wander around with the Geiger counter, and whenever near the clump of seaweed, the Geiger counter would click furiously and loudly. He calls it a gadget instead of giving it the respect that it deserves. He calls it a gadget. Atomic kitten. Locals invaded by radioactive cats. Oh my God. That's horrible. What can we do to help them, I wonder? After workers at UK's most hazardous site nicknamed Nuclear Narnia fed 100 strays. But are they a myth? No, it's not a myth. You got to put it in there, though, just to be a scumbag. Protesters claim Europe's largest nuclear disease factory is jeopardizing safety of the locals. So this is absurdness, because it's common knowledge that Sellafield, which is surrounded by farms, by the way, is one great big stupid disease factory. All those farms are radioactive murder machines. Strays roaming, so they're going to radioactive cats, right? So instead of talking about actual radiation, radioactive kitty cats. Wait till you see what they got done here. It's pretty cool for a scumbag, of course. Strays roaming wild across Sellafield nuclear disaster. And Columbia, which is they have cancer clusters in children there. They blamed it on the common flu because nuclear is right next door, right? Can't blame it on nuclear. The cancer clusters were the flu. That was the flu that done that. On the Colombian coast poses a risk because they're literally pooing plutonium and americium, neptunium, and strontium. The colony of feral cats grew after they were fed scraps by the victims who work at Sellafield, which is Europe's largest nuclear facility. The group called Radiation Free, the largest nuclear disaster in Europe is more like it. The group called Radiation Free Lakeland, we've covered them before, claimed to have consulted experts and found that the cat's feces contained detectable traces of plutonium and cesium, which is the British terminology, pronunciation. A theory firmly denied by the scumbags at Sellafield, the degenerate scumbags at Sellafield. I went there personally and I interviewed the cat, and the cat said, yeah, man, it hurts when I shit. This is a big, stupid disease factory surrounded by farmlands. Why is it surrounded by farmland? Everybody gets sick in Colombia. Colombia is the cancer capital of UK and disease capital of United Kingdom. Yeah, they got a few stray cats. And two. Was also home to the world's first nuclear disease factory called Calder Hall. Remember, the Queen Elizabeth was there and opened it. She was very young then, right? 1956. Do you remember that video of her, Elizabeth? Disaster struck the nuclear facility after the Windscale fire in 1957. So one of the worst nuclear incidences in Europe. Yeah, because there's been quite a few, hasn't there? An incident that had major environmental implications as a toxic plume I cut that off when I clipped it originally. A plume of toxic plume of toxic. No, it's a plume of radioactive emissions. Smoke. It's not smoke, it's radiation. There's a graphite and uranium reactor. And so it's incredibly radioactive. Spread across the continent. And so it's interesting because spread across the continent, and this led to all the milk within 200 miles of the site being condemned as radioactive. But what did the cow ever do? So it led to, let me stop there for a second. It led to all the cow's milk in 200 square miles of radius of the site being condemned as radioactive. And so whenever they used to have nuclear leaks, they would go out and kill some of the local cows in the farmers' fields because they're surrounded by farmer fields, the majority of nuclear power plants. And they would slice open with a scalpel the stomach, and they would take out certain organs to check for radiation, right? And then the local media would get kickbacks and come out and say that a UFO landed in the local farmers' fields and killed some of the cows and has removed some of their parts. And if you go look up the stories, the United Kingdom was really bad for publishing them stories, because the majority of nuclear power plants worldwide, if not all of them, or almost all of them, are surrounded by farms as far as you can see. As a plume of toxic smoke spread across the continent, smoke doesn't spread, it's too heavy, it doesn't spray that far. Anthropogenic man-made radiation does. Gas, oil, and coal emissions like carbon don't create plumes that covers the entire planet, just anthropogenic man-made radiation. And that's it, that's all that covers it. The site has a workforce of 11,000 people with its own railway and its own road network. Well, that's crazy. That's just crazy talk. Its own railway network, its own laundry service for normal and potentially radioactive loads. Well, why would it have its own laundry service at a nuclear disease factory for? Well, I can't understand that. Because if you start bringing the laundry out, they're going to radiate everybody's washers and dryers, right? If they book it out, they got to have their own. And then anybody washes their clothes in it after becomes radiated. Oh, they got their own police force too, with more than 80 dogs. You shouldn't call the police dogs. That's terrible. It has almost 1,000 buildings. It gets better. Entering Sellafield is like arriving in another world. You got a whole bunch of high school diplomas with guns. It's like nuclear Narnia, except you don't go through a cupboard, you go through checkpoints where police patrol with guns. Yeah, they got a high school education, right? We covered the applications for these jobs. Sellafield. Crumbia, which is right next to it, is one great big, it's just endless cancers, endless heart problems, endless liver problems. It's a cancer mega center, right? Sellafield says the cats for rehoming are monitored for radiation by scanning the outside of the cage for gamma. These people are insane, eh? They just lie, they don't even care. Our own more intensive laboratory tests, because they're acknowledging other people done laboratory tests in that case, from poo taken from 2 of the cats at the animal shelter indicated the cat A had only the expected peak for lead-210. Only had lead-210, really. Which doesn't come from a reactor. They're hard cases, boy. They're insane, right? The public relation won't even acknowledge the basics. So they got a meltdown ongoing there since 1957. From a mixed oxide reactor, no less. Cat A had the only expected peak for lead-210. Peak. Like my Geiger counter can't measure lead. Seascale resident Frankie said cats roaming the village looked thin and sickly. And they said looks thin and sickly, and then they put a big girl in the picture to distract you, right? So I put cats and jaguars and children on to distract you from what they just done to you. Outside the Seascale post office, another former worker was dismissed. The supposed danger. He said if a cat had plutonium in the system, even the tiniest speck, it wouldn't walk around. It'd be dead in no time. So there, they can't have plutonium. It'd be dead in no time. Thank God we cleared that up, is all I can say. The idea that there are radioactive cats wandering the countryside is nonsense. Which is the biggest nuclear disaster in Europe is Sellafield. They got spots there you still can't, you haven't went there in 50 years. And they're surrounded by farms. And Cully, 72, who worked at the site, said, I personally don't believe the cats pose any danger to anyone. I don't think many people do, apart from those who want to bring down the nuclear industry. Or just want to bum everybody out. Wait for it. Wait for the end. This will always be against nuclear sites in Sellafield, but the whole economy of West Columbia is based around this disease factory, and people here believe the government should be doing more to back the nuclear disease factories. Whilst on the site, the cats were unable to access any radiologically controlled area. Like, really? You're able to keep cats out, were you? Stray cats that are everywhere. You're able to keep them out of all the areas, are you? Really? Like, crazy doesn't quite do it when you... Whoever the public relation officer was that they consulted with should have their DNA checked to see what kind of species they are, because they're definitely not human. Whilst on the site, the cats couldn't access any radiological areas. I mean, they got outdoor pools there that nobody knows what's in it. It has never been touched for 50 years. Are full of fuel reactor cores. No one can go there. It's too radioactive. They used to shoot the seagulls when they land in the fuel pools, right? That are outdoors. Why would you put a... Because, like, not only is there no containment, there's no containment. It's outdoors. Like, that's a whole different kind of maniac. That's a whole different kind of monster. We got a poll. I forgot about it again. Should United Nations Constipated Party 28 be cancelled after this year to give humanity and the species a chance to survive? 5,000 homes will be switched to geothermal energy free of charge here in Canada. Why would you look at nuclear when you can just do geothermal? Every community can have their own geothermal plant. It's completely harmless to the environment. Worker exposed to radiation at Fukushima nuclear plant. He was working by Unit 2 apparently. What are they doing at Unit 2, Dana? Well, I don't know. It's a complete meltdown. They lost all the reactor core and the 2 fuel pools at the top of the building with decades of reactor cores, and they're doing nothing. They're setting up the cover story for Reactor 1 and 2, right? Claiming they're going to get all the fuel, or all the reactor cores out of the fuel pool, like they faked for Reactor 4 and they faked for Reactor 3, which I showed you at the very beginning of this show tonight. I work at the Japan's crippled. I think any journalist that says these reactors are crippled should be crippled. The government should have to go in and break their legs or something. Radioactive material was found on the worker's face during a routine radiation test as he was leaving the site. So they're checking just for gamma. They're not checking for anything else then. After decontaminating fences? Decontaminating fences? What the fuck are you talking about? Excuse the language. You can't decontaminate a fence. They can't open their mouth without lying, right? How are you going to decontaminate a fence? How's that work? What'd you do today, honey? I already decontaminated the fence. That's what we wrote down anyway. Oh, we decontaminated the fence. How'd the homeless ever learn to do something like that, I wonder? Near the plant's number 2 reactor building. So they decontaminated the fence and other equipment in a room near the plant. So there was a fence, equipment, I can't even wrap my mind around this story. So in a room near the number 2, this is huge sites, by the way. In a room near the plant's number 2 reactor, which is 100% meltdown. In a room there's a fence and other equipment. Like, what are you talking about? When the site, like a typical nuclear power plant, when it closes, 90% of it doesn't get decontaminated. It gets taken to a nuclear waste dump, right? Because you can't decontaminate it. He was decontaminating fences and other equipment in a room. It's just what? Sure you were. What was he really doing, though, I wonder? What was this poor, homeless, and destitute, and victim of society, and immigrant who don't speak the language? What were these victims doing for the degenerate government? Because TEPCO's nationalized, right? And he was decontaminated immediately. What do you do? Cut off his face or something? Like, it's such a disparage from how it works. It's like he went home and he was talking to his pet frog or something. He go, "Hi, Froggy, how you doing?" Yeah, there was a worker got radiation on his face, and he was decontaminating fences and other equipment in a room close to reactor number 2. Because that makes a whole lot of fucking sense. But don't worry, we decontaminated them immediately, Froggy. So he had a bad day, but I had a good day. Because that's how that conversation must have went. So, okay, let's type that up. Leave it to Froggy. He was decontaminated immediately, citing the plant operator Tokyo Electric Power Company. TITCO. He was decontaminated immediately. Hey, hang on, I got a broom here. I'll sweep that off you. All right, you're okay now. Go on. Get out of here. Send us people who don't mind dying. That TIPCO? Is that the TIPCO you're talking about? Immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO, God, TEPCO. TEPCO, God, all the same thing, isn't it? In Japan, TEPCO is God for a lot of people. In Japan. Hey, you crazy critter. Just bear with me. Maybe I can find that clip. I know you're laughing after, but hang on. I might find it. Everybody's after laughing at me. Dana thinks he can find the clip. Come on, have some faith in Dana. Have some faith in Dana. Eek. I don't need to prove nothing, see? So I'm not going to bother looking for it. Don't need to prove nothing. The man in his 20s is wearing a protective full face mask and a paper suit, much like these three clowns. So it's going to come as a shock to everybody, but a paper suit can't protect you at a nuclear meltdown. And that's the first time they went back into the control room, which is quite a long ways away from nuclear meltdown, in almost 8 years. It was a little under 8 years. And there was only one person who went back in there since. And we covered that story too. And he was in the dark with a flashlight, right? That was a few weeks ago. The incident followed one in October when 2 men were hospitalized after they were splashed with radioactive liquid while cleaning the plant's Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS, a water filtration facility. We covered that lie too, by the way. The ALPS system. Oh, ALPS. What am I going to do with you guys? You guys are always having accidents. TEPCO to perpetual accident machine. The hell did I just do to myself? Here we go. Let me explain the ALPS system to you. Because that's always fun. So TEPCO failed to deliver on us, the wrong one. Slow here tonight, Dana, I'm sorry. So April 21st, 2014, that's 3 years, 1 month later. The Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, has yet to function reliably. Okay, that's pretty good. TEPCO abandoned the REVA system, which is the same as the ALPS, which is the French version, August 12, 2014, 3.5 years later. For the last 3 years, the system was unused and kept out of operation. What about that fence, that bypass operation? That worked right? No, that didn't work either. What about that fence, Dana? Did that work? No, that didn't work either. Did the ice wall? Yeah, the ice wall, Dana. That worked, right? No, the ice wall didn't work. Why would you build an ice wall? Why didn't you build a real wall? The series system, Dana. That worked, right? And the Korean system, which are both cesium-137, they said filtration systems. You're going to pour water over or melt a reactor core. You're going to separate cesium from 1,000 other fission products. The atoms are all the same size, right? So if you got 200 million atoms in the head of a needle, and out of that 200 million atoms, 10,000 is cesium-137 atoms, you're going to separate them out separate, are you? Really? Really? Because you can't separate the atoms. If you've got 200 million atoms at the head of a needle, you can't filter that. You got to contain everything. You can't filter it. And so they've been dumping everything into the ocean. They built the tanks. Were all built in 2013. TEPCO plans to dump water stored at Fukushima Daiichi into the Pacific 2013. And the plant had already released an enormous amount of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks. These are not leaks. The buildings are actually destroyed. Yeah, they built covers on it to manipulate you into complacency, but they're actually destroyed, right? So the fuel pool is on top of the new structure that doesn't physically touch the Reactor 4 underneath it. It's only built there to manipulate you. And then they claim inside of it looks like that to the right. Inside the building that no longer exists. As Helen Caldecott said, they're very, very tidy people. The series system, how come we never heard about that after? EU Energy Commissioner called Fukushima an apocalypse, and they were right. France says Japan lost control. They were right. And Swiss said abandon Tokyo 240 miles away because they were right. And energy officials said Tokyo lost all control of events of Fukushima. They were right. And nuclear reports warned of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima in the weeks ahead. And the ambassador said this could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the entire planet. Korea says Japan is incompetent, and they were right. And a Japan professor made the remarkable announcement that 1,000 years from now, radioactive water from Fukushima may still be entering the Pacific Ocean. Well, that's guaranteed. A lot of the reactor core from Reactor 2 and Reactor 1 are gone China syndrome deep into the earth. Because it's built on a riverbed that is flooded, and it'll always flood it into the ocean. You have to go down and dig it out if you want to have species in the future. And water above 1 sievert per hour is acknowledgement of how much radiation we're talking about. But the ALPS system didn't work. The whole country is radioactive, but there's 14 prefectures banned by 55 countries for a decade. That quantifies you paying attention. That's your wake-up call. That's your, oh shit, we're in trouble call. Excuse me, I could have turned the volume down and done it that way. No, not me, no. I'm too lazy to do something sensible. It's way too hard to do something sensible. Let's do something sensible then. Let's close the poll down. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I apologize. Music was a bit loud last night for the closing. Should United Nations Constipated Party 28 be cancelled after this year to give humanity and the species a chance to survive? Well, hell yeah, they should be. And good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thank you, everybody. Calm down, Charlie's very tidy. So it was a great poll tonight. We appreciate everybody participation. It means a lot in this time of craziness. Oh, that's the wrong side. Now, hopefully I got the volume low enough. It's not going to drown me out tonight. I know, I'm a major screw up. I'm always screwing something up. I'm really good at both. Pretty good at nuclear, but I'm better at screwing shit up. I'm going to be back tomorrow night because I don't like the nuclear industry. There you go, I said it. And I don't regret it. I hate the nuclear industry. Say it out loud. I hate the nuclear industry. Doesn't that feel better? Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night.